Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I came up with this topic yesterday. I was looking at a couple different things, people write in the comments and different things that people try, and I was chatting with Brittany, and I told her, I said, look at all this stuff. These people come up with these crazy ideas, and then they wonder why they're still small. They're in here trying to beat on the iron, and they're doing stuff that's totally contrary to what we know has been proven to work with athletes, lifters, even bodybuilders going back for decades. I'm talking going back 50, 60 years. The things that we know work, they want to apply stuff completely different to that's unproven. And when you look at it physiologically, we know is going to give less hypertrophy. And she's like, wow, it sounds like they're trying to reinvent the wheel. And I'm like, they're not reinventing the wheel, they're reinventing the steel. A little bit of classic Pantera reference. And I'll give you guys some examples of what I mean. Because we know that workload, the best way, the fastest way to gain as much muscle mass as quickly as possible is to put a big focus on heavy compound movements and generate as much workload as you can recover from, right? Is the more workload that you can stimulate using big exercises and still recover from it and adapt to it, the more muscle you're going to gain. And we don't even need to get into an argument about barbells versus dumbbells, barbells versus machines on that. Even though you guys know my preferences is barbells, I think we can apply what I just said universally to big compound movements. In other words, the more muscles you get involved in training that get sufficient stimulation to grow, the more you're going to grow. Well, one example I saw, a guy was posting yesterday, and he keeps going on and on. No. See, I see guys like Matt Ogus have these imbalances, and what I tried years ago before I got hurt and had to quit and restart again was I found that if I really worked my rear delts before I got on a novice program, before I got on any sort of real training, I spent a bunch of time working my rear delts and just my rear delts. Then when I started actually lifting and starting a novice program, I felt like my rear delts contracted better when doing overhead pressing, and it was less likely to create an imbalance because I had developed them already, and it makes them the primary movers. They get more work because they're stronger, right? And I had to try to explain to the guy, look, physiologically that doesn't work. Your rear delts don't get more work just because you made them stronger. Rear delts do get worked on the overhead press. We've got good EMG data showing that they get worked even harder if you stand. All right, that's known. There's good documentation on that. But they don't get really maximum stimulation on that exercise. In other words, if all you did for rear delts was overhead pressing, they're probably going to end up a little bit underdeveloped, right? That's why you need to row. That's why you need to do chin-ups. And in some cases, that's a muscle that you might actually, even though I'm not real big on isolation, that's a muscle you might actually want to isolate just for your overall shoulder health and muscle balance, right? And the guy goes on to argue when I try to explain that to him. He says, no, I know I felt it in my muscles more. And again, people have these weird ideas that just because what you feel in a muscle determines what's being worked, that's not necessarily true. What you feel isn't always dependent upon what's being worked heavily. That's not how it works. We just feel certain things more. And the fact that he had trained them for a while and isolated them, he probably has just learned to feel that muscle better. It doesn't have anything to do with what it's actually doing as far as contraction. So he's just more body aware of that particular muscle because he had previously trained it immediately before going into a real program. Now the thing is, because that muscle is probably considerably bigger and stronger than it needs to be for your overhead press in comparison to the other muscles, it might actually end up getting less stimulation. In other words, it's less likely to adapt further from the overhead pressing because it's disproportionately strong as a secondary mover. It's not a primary mover anyways. It's probably not going to get any development from that. And I also told him, so what you basically did, you just wasted 4 to 6 weeks of actual gains. You could have spent that 4 to 6 weeks gaining muscle mass, strength, making progress, and instead you just went in and worked on your rear delts. And I can understand if you're not an able-bodied person, some people need to actually work on their core and mobility a little bit before they get into the gym and do real lifts. For a really sedentary person, particularly middle-aged who's been sedentary for a long time, sometimes you have to do that. But a healthy young man doesn't need to. A healthy young man who's intact with no real injuries can just come in and start training, and they can start making gains from day one. right? It's not a problem. And the guy still continued to argue that no, it helps prevent muscle imbalances. I'm sure of it. And instead, all he did was try to reinvent the steel or the iron. I don't know. Depends on what your barbells and plates are made out of. And shortchanged his progress. That's all he did. That's all he did. There's no need to reinvent these things. We know what works. It's been time proven for a long time now. Progressive overload with big movements puts the most size on you. And I'm not even saying isolation doesn't have its place when I make that statement, but compound movements are going to put more muscle on you. They're going to put more muscle through your whole body. In other words, a bench press is going to put more muscle on you than a fly will. Or a tricep extension done separately, right? It's because it's working the same muscles plus other muscles. A weighted chin up is going to put more muscle on you than a concentration curl. This isn't subject to debate. Doesn't mean isolation doesn't have its place, but we know this. And then I had a person, the same thing. I was discussing partials yesterday, right? And a guy tries to come in and say, well, by your logic, couldn't you just work the bottom half of the bench press? Because the topper half, because the pecs get stretched the most at the bottom, the lockout at the top really doesn't use a lot of chest anymore in comparison to the bottom half, particularly with the same weight. And it seems like it's more shoulder and tricep dominant. You could get better chest development if you just did the bottom. And I had to explain to him, first of all, there are negatives to decelerating the bar and skipping the lockout. Number two, don't you want big triceps? In other words, the bench press is an exercise that actually makes several different muscles grow really, really well. The bench press, if done correctly through its full range of motion, actually can build your pecs. It can build your entire chest, actually. It can build your interior deltoids, and some of that even just over a little bit to the side delts. It's not all contained in the interior deltoid. There's radiant effect in different muscles like that, and it's actually a pretty good tricep builder. Do you want small arms? I mean, is your goal to intentionally have smaller arms? So why would you want to use less tricep on the bench press? We've already know studies have shown that constant tension doesn't actually stimulate any extra muscle growth. So just because the chest is working a little less hard at the top doesn't mean you aren't recruiting muscle fibers, because you have to remember to continue to accelerate and not decelerate the bar before you reach the terminal end of it actually causes less muscle fiber recruitment. So you're trading off total muscle fiber recruitment on a work set in exchange for continual tension. And if you're actually correct and the triceps are getting less work, you're getting less tricep development. People do stuff like this and then wonder why they're not making gains, why they're still small. It doesn't matter what some pro bodybuilder does, they're going to get big no matter what they do. They're usually genetic freaks using bucket loads of drugs, right? What they do isn't useful to you. You're not going to learn much from it. Most of it's not applicable to you. But people want to take even things like this, the most basic exercises that we know how they work. I mean, a bench press works really well if you come all the way down, touch your chest, don't bounce it, and then you explode and lock it out, right? It gives you the most possible pectoral recruitment, the most possible tricep recruitment. These are muscles most people want to grow, even the aesthetics guys. The guys who are chasing aesthetics usually want bigger pecs and bigger triceps, right? They want big chests and big arms. The strength athlete wants to use it to get stronger, but even those guys want a little more pec, a little more tricep. So why would you perform the exercise in a way that shortchanges you? And he's like, well, there's better exercises for triceps. Yeah, but you don't want to have to do more tricep work. Why shortchange yourself on an exercise in a way that forces you to have to do more isolation work to catch back up? Because you're not going to gain any more chest doing it that way. It's not increasing your chest gains. In theory, what you described, if that's even how it works, and that's questionable, all you're doing is gaining less tricep from the same exercise. And possibly less pectoral. But even if it gave equal pec gains, which it might, you're losing tricep gains. You're going to have to go do extra tricep work instead of just getting all your gains. Same thing this other guy's talking about, let me just isolate these muscles for a while and then start a real program. So you just threw away a whole month. You threw away a whole month of gains to try some silly stuff. Again, there's no need to reinvent the wheel, guys. The basics work, and they work for a reason. There's a reason they're the basics. These things have become the basics because they are time proven to work. And the odds are that the people out there who are new to lifting, someone who has less than 5 years of serious training experience, who's never coached another person on top of it, the odds that you're going to find some magic secret that's going to work as well, not even better, but even as well as what's already been proven by thousands of coaches over the decades, is actually pretty unlikely. You're very unlikely to find a new discovery yourself that's even going to equal what's already known, especially when you're relatively inexperienced. Because a lot of these theories that people come up with have actually been tried and by other people and been found to be nonsense, and they're not even physiologically sound. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.